Xanet Pailet is a nationally recognised sex and intimacy coach, a somatic sexologist, and best-selling author of Living an Orgasmic Life. Known for helping high-functioning couples move from roommates back to lovers. After leaving a 26-year sexless marriage and a successful career as an NYC healthcare returning executive, she devoted herself to trauma-informed, body-based sexuality work, founding passionate intimacy retreats to guide couples and women through immersive healing experiences in Asheville, Costa Rica, and beyond. Just as an aside, I've always wanted to retire to Costa Rica for some reason. I've never been there, but just in my head, it's always been, yep, Costa Rica as a place. Anyway, drawing on training and it does look so stunning, yeah. Drawing on training in somatica, sex and intimacy coaching, somatic experiencing, tantra, and holistic pelvic care, she works with hundreds of clients to reclaim desire, rebuild trust, and experience intimacy as a part of freedom, connection, and joy. Thank you so much for doing this. I have to sort of start by taking you back a little bit, just to understand who you were during your formative years. Do you think the 14, 15-year-old you would recognize who you are today?
Probably not. No, I don't think so. My formative years were probably everything different than what I am today. My formative years was very disconnected from my body, really uncomfortable with sex and sexuality, and didn't really understand emotions, emotional connection, intimacy, empathy. None of that was part of my formative years.
What do you think changed? Because obviously that's very different from the person you are today.
Yeah. Well, I think my journey, Andrew, obviously had a lot to do with it. I lived in a sexless marriage for 26 years. That's a very long time to be in a sexless marriage. And, you know, my own experience of leaving that marriage and then doing my own work around sexual awakening and reconnecting with my body and really understanding sexuality from the perspective of human psychology, which I really didn't, as well as from the perspective of somatics, which is really about the body, really changed my perspective, changed who I am, changed how I show up in the world, changed how I show up in relationships. Like all of that has had a significant change since I was 14.
So when you entered the marriage, did you know it was going to be a sexless marriage, or was that something that evolved during time?
No, I definitely did not know that when I entered the marriage. I mean, I knew that at some level sexuality was challenging for me, and I knew that. My partner knew that as well. But I just assumed it would be fine once I was married, right? Like I didn't think that the issues I had in college as a teenager would persist into the marriage. That was surprising for me, for sure. Not surprising now that I know what I know, but at the time,
no,
very surprising, right? Exactly.
Yeah, it's always easy, isn't it? Look, hindsight's a wonderful thing. When we look back and think, that's why. But there must have been a point, I guess, where you decided that staying in a marriage and staying in your high-powered legal career was more frightening than leaving and stepping into the unknown. So what was the sort of catalyst for deciding, no, that isn't how the rest of my life is going to play out?
Well, I mean, staying in the marriage when you have 2 young children, right, and you feel responsibility for getting them through high school and into college was the logical choice for me as a mom, you know, like it was just like, I'm not going to leave my kids. And, you know, while the marriage was maybe certainly sexless and probably large portions of it fairly loveless, we were a good family unit. Like, we loved our kids. We had a good time with our kids. We went, like, as a family, we were very solid. I think that's why so many of our friends and family were really surprised when we separated. But what happens behind closed doors is very different than what goes on in public, right? And so it was always like obvious to me that I was going to stay till my kids got into college. And then it just became obvious, like I couldn't stay here anymore. Like neither of us could. We were both pretty miserable, right? And we were young-ish, and it didn't make sense to continue something where we were both really unhappy and miserable, and it just became very obvious, like, yeah, this has to end.
So after being so, I'm not sure what the right word is really, so restricted or sexually shut down for so many years, how did the awakening feel? What did it feel like when you actually thought, oh, okay, it can be like this?
Freeing, like discovering a part of myself that I didn't even know existed, right? Like it really was. It was like, oh, there was this part of myself like I've never accessed before. My body can move in different ways. I can have pleasure. Like I can like myself and like my body and like what it says and what it does. It was a very freeing time for me. And it was almost like I was a kid in a candy shop getting to like try this and try that and meet this person and meet that person and have all sorts of different like fascinating experiences that I never even thought was possible. So it was a beautiful experience. Also hard, right? It's not like it was just, whoa, here we go, right? It was like one step forward, 3 steps backward, one step forward, 3 steps backward. There was a lot of uncovering past trauma. There was a lot of uncovering false beliefs. There was a lot of uncovering, seemingly unrelated trauma that actually affected me in terms of my dad died when I was 3 years old. And my mom never remarried, so I never had a modeling of what a healthy female-male relationship would actually be. She never even dated, right? And so it was a lot of uncovering and recognizing how that trauma at 3 had a huge impact on what I felt about relationships, how I thought I was supposed to show up in a marriage. But that took some time to unravel. I'm honestly 15 years later still unraveling parts of that.
Was there a particular type of therapy or counseling that worked for you better than others?
I didn't go through the traditional therapy route. I mean, I did have a therapist, and my therapist really helped me leave the marriage. And then I had another therapist who helped me leave a very unhealthy relationship after I left the marriage because, that was something that, something that just happened that, again, was all very trauma-based around my fear of attachment and losing somebody and really just losing myself. But what really helped me was the somatic experience that I was having. So I walked through the doorway of Tantra and sacred sexuality, and that was in many ways life-changing for me. It really gave me a completely different perspective of what sex can be like and what it can feel like in my body. And that's really where my awakening began. And that was kind of my path that I traveled. Traditional talk therapy, I never did sex therapy, didn't even think about it, but I don't think it would have been very effective because, I know, right, from the work I do with my own clients, right, that you can't talk your way into better sex. You have to have a lived, embodied experience around it. So that, traditional therapy, even sex therapy, would have not been very effective for me. And I don't find it very effective for a lot of people, unfortunately.
So, sexless marriage, big step to leave that, to explore what works for you and refine your own desire and rekindle your own passion. Another big step to then decide, hey, you know what? I think I should teach other people this. What was the step from a very successful career, something that was very well established and people very comfortable with, to doing this whole new thing? What was that sort of process like?
Yeah, that was an interesting process. That was I think it was a lot of it was just like, I am re-envisioning who this person is, who I am, right? From like the very core of my being to all of the extensions of me. And part of that was I liked what I was doing. I was good at it. I was successful, but I wasn't particularly passionate about it. And I just think I always felt inside of me that, oh, there's something else here. There's something I'm supposed to be doing that is going to make a difference. I just knew that, right? And so that was a big piece of it, which was like, I'm not really happy with what I'm doing. My mom ended up passing from dementia, from Alzheimer's disease, when she was just about 95 years old, a day before her 95th birthday. And that was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was just like, you know what? I was about to go on an interview to take this big job in California. I'd moved from New York to California at that point. And I was just like, yeah, no, I'm kind of sick to my stomach thinking about doing this other job. And I think I need a rest. I need some time. I need to really explore what I want. And that was the time that I started doing some training in the area of sex. I took my first, what did I do there? I can't remember. But I took one of the, sexological bodywork, right? That was my very first training program. And that was just a total reset for me. It was a total reset. It was like, oh, wow, this is something different. Look at the changes that are happening in me in just so many different ways. And what would it be like if I could do this for other people? In all of these training programs, I'm sure you know probably, all of these like training programs are kind of training you to teach or coach or something else. Like, it's leading there. Some of it is, yes, for your own personal healing, but it's kind of leading to a different experience of using your skills to better the world. And I was very, very susceptible to that. I was like, I can do that. This sounds like a lot more fun than being a lawyer, being a healthcare executive. Scary, because I didn't have any clients, and I knew a lot about business because I was running other people's businesses for many years. But running your own business is like a totally different experience. But that was really like what led me to, that decision. It started kind of slowly, but I got really good results, and people really were making significant changes. So it was just like, okay, I'm just going to keep on going.
That's a good decision. A good decision.
It was a good decision.
One of the things that you've said, and that I completely concur with, is that pleasure is something for everyone. Pleasure is our birthright, I think. But there are a lot of people, and like I say, we don't know what goes on behind closed doors, but a lot of people don't feel pleasure, whether that's self-pleasure or pleasure with a partner, and it's something that they've excluded from their lives for many reasons. And I wondered why you think we are, in many ways, so disconnected from our body's desire, intimacy.
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think a lot of it stems from the belief system that we grew up with, the way that we were socialized to think about pleasure for somebody else's part, but not on your own part, not being able to ask for what you want. Sexuality being, very sexualized, and not really feeling like you're connected to your body, right? Like, I like to say in some ways, like, we're the most sex positive, like, sex is exploited for money, for commerce, but we're really a sexually shut down culture, both the US and the UK, right? From whence we came. Maybe we'll go back, who knows? But I think that's a big part of why people are so disconnected from their pleasure. I think women in particular have been socialized that sex is for their partner's pleasure for a lot of women. There's a lot of shame around asking for pleasure. There's a lot of shame around not demonstrating that you're, quote, having pleasure, even if you're faking it. So I think there's a lot of factors that disconnect us. I think also in the last 10 years, but even really, especially in the last couple of years, you know, all of the ways in which we are using technology for our intimacy is really having an impact on human to human connection. You know, my partner and I, we were just at a restaurant the other night, and there were two lovely, I don't know, guessing graduate students, we're in a college town, sitting and having dinner, obviously on a date, and they were like eating, talking, and then they'd each pick up their phone and, you know, seemingly texting with other people, whatever, and then coming back. And I'm just like, wow, that feels so disconnected to me. You know, I'm plenty addicted to my phone, but I don't pick it up during meals, and I try really hard to put it down, you know, when I don't actually need it. But I do think that there's an addictive element of that, which no question is built into the algorithm, and it is creating distance. And, you know, look at my 15-year-old partner's 15-year-old, like all of his interactions is online with people, right? What's it like when you actually get in the real world? Like, I do think that is a big piece of what's happening, why people are having less sex, why teenagers aren't exploring sexually as much as they used to. Like, all of those, I think, are not going to be good for our society. I mean, they're already not good for our society, but I think that's part of the reason intimacy is devolving.
Oh gosh, I couldn't agree with you more. That's one of my big concerns. I've got a 15-year-old son and an 18-year-old daughter, and we're fairly fortunate through no sort of parenting skill that my son can hold a conversation with adults, with his peers, and can hold a room and can talk to somebody, and we'll walk into a room, shake your hand, and have a reasoned conversation with you, which I think is such a wonderful skill. But I do think so many people, and I think it's this expectation and demand for instant gratification, whether and that might come in the form of a message from somebody, it might come in the form of easy access to pornography, it might come in the form of easy access to anything you want online, whereas in person you aren't getting that. And I do think that, as you said, it sends out so many confusing messages. If you're a young woman or a woman of any age, you look at the magazines or news or television or media or pornography or whatever, and there's an expectation of what you should be, but then if you act in a certain way, you get shamed for it. So it's very confusing as a young teenager or whatever to understand, well, what is my role? And the same for young guys as well, really. Well, what is their role? Where do they fit into this? And I do think that's a big challenge that I hope somehow we overcome. And I'm not sure what the solution is.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea that in the US there's a movement towards banning phones in schools. I think that's a huge step forward. I know they've done it in Australia, right? It's Australia or New Zealand. Yeah, totally. And some states are doing that as well. And I think, and you know, and it's not just the kids. Like, we're all addicted to it as well, right? Like those people in Silicon Valley, they know how to run those algorithms to, you know, keep you enticed and engaged. And that's also part of the reason there's such a divide in our countries as well, right? And in the world.
And I do think as parents and carers and educators and supporters, we have to model the behaviour, really. We can't sort of sit there. I'm saying to my son, put your phone down, get off your phone. And I'm on my phone the whole time. I've got to see that actually there is a life without a phone, maybe. And we survived very well without them for many years, and only realised we needed them so desperately in the last sort of decade, really. One of the things we touched on then was about the almost the birthright everybody has to pleasure. And I really love the word pleasure. And for a couple of reasons. I think one of the reasons is that for a lot of couples, they're almost orgasm centric, if that makes sense. There's an end goal, right? Got to get to the orgasm. The guy gets off. Hopefully, the woman gets off, and then that's it. In general heteronormative sex, but we sort of forget that pleasure is such a broader scope. As you know, as couples get older, as I get older, my erections aren't the same as they were when I was 20. I'm not having sort of rigorous sex for an hour without stopping. Of course I'm not. But does that mean I can't have or give pleasure anymore? So I think we sort of forget about that sex is this huge spectrum from holding hands, from looking at somebody, for goodness sake, to stroking somebody's back, to giving somebody a massage, to mutual masturbation, to whatever. There's all these things we can do and experience that are incredibly pleasurable, but we sort of seem to hone in on penetration. And if we don't do that, then we've not had sex. Is that something you come across when you talk to couples?
Yeah, I mean, that is like probably the number one piece of information I try to impart to everyone on my podcast, to all my couples, right? Which is, it's really about the journey and not the destination. And it's all of the goal orientation and the expectations that take you out of the experience. They put you in your head, and when you're in your head, right, it's a lot harder to be connected to your body, to be connected to your partner's body, to be connected to your pleasure, because you're thinking and you're worrying, is it going to happen? Am I going to disappoint her? Am I going to disappoint him, right? And so, like, truly redefining sex, this is very, I mean, you said it so beautifully, right? As this very, like, this huge smorgasbord of opportunities of ways in which you can connect with each other erotically, sometimes not without even touching, right? Really changes the dynamic in the relationship and really takes the emphasis off of, and the pressure, right? Because men have pressure to perform, women have pressure to perform as well, right? And none of that feels good for anybody. Like, let's think about it this way, like orgasm happens at the intersection of high arousal and high relaxation, right? If you're under pressure to perform, you're not relaxed, you're anxious, right? Which is another big problem for both women and men. And so, like, if we can just take that off the table and enjoy whatever happens, that really does change the dynamic for couples. And it's really hard sometimes to get that message across. I mean, I can get the message across, but like, for them to really take it in, right? Because we've been so socialized to be so goal-oriented, not just about sex, but about everything in our life, right? That it's really hard for that paradigm mind shift to take place.
And it sounds crazy, but it's almost... Sometimes it feels almost harder to talk about it than do nothing about it. Well, we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, whatever the number is, and okay, well, that's just not part of our life anymore, because we I don't want to be sort of feel I'm being judged by my partner, or feel I'm disappointed in my partner when I sort of say, look, we used to do this, but maybe sometimes I would just love to get in bed and just hold you and just cuddle you and maybe not have sex. Not thinking that my partner's probably thinking, oh, thank goodness you said that. Just thinking that, well, no, my partner expects this sort of 5 times a week, 4 times a day, swinging from the chandeliers type thing, and it's almost creating that safe space where it's not a place of judgment, and I do think that's so much easier or more powerful to do with a professional, with you. I think to come and have that conversation just feels much more comfortable rather than sitting at the dining table or laying in bed one morning trying to have that conversation. So I do think, helping people have that conversation must just change people's lives, really.
Yeah, it does. And I also want to say, and I think this is important for your listeners to understand, is that, because I know how hard it is to have this conversation, because like you're opening up a Pandora's box, I went and created a tool to allow people to start to have this conversation in a very safe way. So I created this intimacy equation quiz, which is like a fun little 3-minute quiz that you take. And you can, I'm going to offer it to all of your listeners. You can find it at this website, howtoimprovemylovelife.com, howtoimprovemylovelife.com. It's a great conversation starter because it's this, fun little it's not a Facebook quiz, but it's one of those Facebook-like personality quizzes, right? Where you take this and you find out what is your intimacy type? Are you more somebody who feels like you're a feeling person and you really need to have conversations? Are you more somebody who is a really touch person and you need to have more contact? Are you somebody where loyalty is really and safety is really important, right? Or maybe are you somebody who's more really adventuresome? That's the way you experience intimacy. But you take this little quiz, right? And then you say to your partner, hey, I took this fun little quiz about my intimacy equation, and it turns out I'm X, Y, and Z. I'm super curious. What do you think your intimacy type is? Do you want to take the quiz too? And that's a way to start the conversation, right? And then we both look at our results, and of course, I feed you information about well, if you're a feeling person, but your partner is more of an adventure person, how do you interact with each other, right? But it starts to have a little bit of a conversation in a safe way. As I do think, not everybody can have somebody like me work with them on this. That's why I wrote a book as well. But, there has to be a tool, a way to start to have that conversation that feels like you're not opening up Pandora's box. Because if I sit down with my partner and say, our sex life really sucks,
It's not going to go well, is it?
It's not going to go well. And then I've opened up a whole Pandora's box that I don't know how to handle, right? So, but having those conversations are critical to be able to start to fix it, to repair your intimacy and sex life, because without those conversations, we just shove things under the rug, and then before you know it, you stop having sex because you're not enjoying it, and your partner one of you keeps on initiated, and then you keep on getting rejected, and you don't want to keep on getting rejected, so you stop initiating, and then nobody feels wanted or desired or have their needs met, right? And before you know it, you're in a sexless relationship where somebody's having an affair. That's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah. So when couples come to your retreats, what do they think they're going to get from the retreat, and what have you found they do get from the retreat?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I live with this message. Tell them what they want to hear, give them what they need. Right? So, they come to a retreat a lot of times because they are in a sexless marriage, or they're having a lot of sex issues around sexuality. And what they want, and they do get it, but it's not the way they think they're going to get it. What they want is to be able to have better sex. What they want is to be able to understand what their partner needs often. What they want is to not have drama around sex. What they want is to explore different positions, because everybody thinks different positions make sex better. And here's the thing, it really doesn't. It's fun, but that's not really the driver for a good sex life. So that's what they want. That's what they say they want. What they get is they get to have an embodied experience about what emotional safety feels like in their body and in the relationship, right? What they get is creating a container where they are allowed to speak their honest truth and be authentic with their partner without the fear of being blamed or shamed or feeling guilty for what they want to express. What they get are tools, because all of this, sex and intimacy, are just tools. They're skills that you can learn. So what they get are tools around empathy. What does empathetic listening look like? What's it like to actually be in your partner's shoes? that's something that, oh my God, if more people in the world could think about that, what a different world we would have, right? Those are the types of, that's what they get out of a retreat. And because they start to feel safer with each other, because they learn how to repair conflict, that's another huge tool that they get. Because they learn how to repair conflict, then everything starts smoothing out, and we can then work more into the physical aspects of intimacy, which they also need. They need to understand how to touch each other, how to ask for it, different types of touch. They need to understand what escalation looks like that feels good versus what it doesn't look like. How to actually initiate sex other than saying, hey, do you want to have sex tonight? Which just doesn't work for a lot of people. But it's one of the most common ways in which sex gets initiated, right? So they learn all of the physical skills around sexuality, and lots of, you can see it on my bookshelf or not, but anatomy, etc. But that's not what they think they're going to get. The really foundational element is the intimacy piece and the emotional connection.
Yeah, because that, in the course of being together, that it sounds silly to say, but almost life gets in the way. You have children, you have your job, you have friends, you have all these different things, and it's you sort of rarely sort of sit back and think, well, what was it? How was it? How did we connect when we first got together? And you don't have to connect in the same way physically, but that emotional connection when it's the two of you. And I'm getting to a stage now so my daughter's left home in September to go to university. My son's 16 in this weekend. So before we know it, we'll suddenly have a house with just two of us. And my wife will look at each other and go, oh, it's just the two of us. And does that mean we're going to reignite our sex lives again? Does it mean we're going to be walking around naked, or does it mean we're going to look at each other and think, oh, maybe it's just been a family that kept us together? Is this still working really? So I imagine that's a lot of the challenge people have, is when that milestone comes in their life. And also, that typically is a time where the menopause strikes, more men are experiencing erectile dysfunction. So there's lots of things happening at the same time. And it's, trying to... Yes, how do you... Sorry, that's a massive question. I guess my question is, what am I going to do when there's an empty nest? What, yeah.
Well, I think the first thing is being, as anything around personal development and growth, being aware. Like being aware that we're on the cusp of becoming empty nesters, right? What does that mean for relationships? Starting to have conversations about what empty nesting actually means, what the fears are around it, what the excitement is about it, and really taking a hard look at the relationship, right? Because that is a very typical cross point for people. They are at that junction. Which road am I going down? Are we staying together? Are we gonna solidify this relationship, or is this a good point for us to go our separate ways? And for some couples, it's the perfect point to go their separate ways. Yeah. And for others, it's like, no, we really like each other. We're friends. We love each other. We just haven't maybe we've grown in different ways, or maybe we just haven't grown together. So here's an opportunity for us to reestablish connection and reestablish intimacy and make it a priority, because life does get in the way, right? Children get in the way when they're young. They get in the way because they barge into your room at 3 o'clock, or 6 o'clock in the morning. And when they're teenagers, they get in your way because they're home, or they want to have a chit chat at 11 o'clock at night, right? They just get in the way. But here's the perfect opportunity, like, oh, nobody's in the way anymore. We could walk around naked. Is that what we want to do? We could go to a fun sex workshop. Is that what we want to do? We could start reading some books. We could start prioritizing our intimate life and deciding what that looks like, right? I think it's a great question. It's an important question to ask. And so many couples don't ask it until they're deep into it and so separate at that point that it's really hard to come back together.
Yeah, I think, as you said, it's like acknowledge it, make a statement, say like this is happening, or this is going to happen in a year's time, or this is what are we? Yeah, isn't that a great opportunity? What are we going to do? Yeah, as you said, rather than the children left home for 2, 3, 4 years, and it's like, oh gosh, we're drifting further and further apart. I'm playing golf all the time, you're playing tennis all the time, or whatever, and we're just not doing anything together. One of the things you talked about quite a bit, and it really fascinates me because I've talked to other people that are incredibly passionate about it, is the value in somatics and somatic experiencing and tantra, and in the sort of, I guess, the body-based approach. Because one of the things I've always struggled with traditional therapy is, it's great to be able to talk to somebody and talk, but I've always found my feelings, sensations manifest themselves very physically. I can feel them very physically, and they never get released. So I have all this sort of therapy, talk, and then I come to a point where I think, well, we can't go any further with this. But there's still that, yeah. And I just wondered how important you feel taking a body-based approach and almost a very holistic approach is in repairing intimacy or creating intimacy.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely the foundation of my belief system and the foundation of my work because, I'm the person who sees a couple who's been in therapy for decades, marriage counseling, who've been to sex therapists as well, and they're still not in a good place. They're still not having intimacy. They're still not having a good sex life. They still can't communicate, right? So I'm that person who they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Like, we're either going to fix this or we're going to leave, separate. And so for most people, I mean, some people are very heady and it's hard to get them to feel sensation in their body, right? And that can be a struggle of just like having to really slow it down so they can start to feel what it's like to have their feet on the ground. Like that's how, minute we're going. But, the whole theory that you can change your sex life by talking about it, yeah, you can talk about it. But if you're feeling disconnected from your partner, you don't remember what connection feels like. And that's not something you get by talking. That's something that you get by maybe sitting and looking in each other's eyes and just being with the emotions that show up. And this happens all the time. Like people start bawling because they haven't had this experience maybe since they first met each other, maybe ever, of really being with each other. And because sexuality and intimacy really happens in our bodies. Like we know what it feels like in our body to feel safe. Most of us have that experience somewhere of what safety feels like. A lot of people have felt very unsafe in their bodies. But we know when something shifts, we feel a breath, right? We feel, this is all nervous system, right? We feel our nervous system settle and then our shoulders relax and we're like, oh, I can take a breath here, as opposed to I'm hunched up, I'm contracted in my chest and I can't actually breathe. So since this happens in our body, the sense of safety, the sense of erotic charge, the only way to learn it, to relearn it, and to experience it is to allow it to manifest in the body itself and to take people through a very experiential, interactive process where they can have that experience of what safety feels like, what erotic connection feels like, what that energy of, oh yes, feels like, and that energy of like, oh hell no, feels like, right? And that all happens in the body. And so taking the body out of the equation just makes it really impossible to be able to reconnect those neuronal pathways, that nervous system that needs to understand how it needs to want to get activated when it's aroused, and how when it's scared it needs to like shut down, or it needs grounding and being really settled. And I just know because I've been doing this for 15 years and I started through a somatic process, right? And so much of psychology has moved away from, CBT, right, into more somatic work. Like the body is this incredible instrument that has so much information in it. And the more we can access it, the more fully we can feel, the more fully we can be present with ourselves and with our partner, the more fully we can experience pleasure in all aspects of life. So I think it's a very important and overlooked piece around intimacy and sexuality. Not overlooked for me and my clients, but in general, in the world of therapy, overlooked.
Yeah, it's akin to lots of other things. I think when you think about theory and practice, I think about art as an example. You can read as much as you want about how to paint a picture, but ultimately, at some point, you're going to have to get the brush, put in the paint, and make a mark on the canvas. And my mark's going to be very different to your mark, and somebody else's mark. And we're going to paint in different ways. We're going to experience the medium in different ways. In the same way, if you think about cooking, the same thing, you can read a recipe as many as you want, but until you actually do it and experience it and feel the sensations, I think art's a good analogy. I think when you feel the sensations of actually, what does it feel like to hold the clay, to make the mark, to see how bold you are, or how restricted you are, or whatever. But you don't know any of that if you just read the books about how to. How to is fine, but at some point, you're going to have to step up.
And even if you read the book, let's say you read the book about like touching your partner lightly. Well, there's like 100 different ways to touch lightly, right? And so you need to be able to have that experience of feedback. Like, oh, I like it that way. Like, I like it when you barely touch me versus I like it when you use your whole hand, right? Like all of those experiences, you don't know what you don't know until your body starts to have the experience of it. And I think that's one of the huge aha moments that happen in my retreats, where couples are like finally able to see what they like and what feels good, and then have words to be able to describe it to their partner, right? That's just not something that flows very easily for most couples.
And I think that's what's key is when you said how it feels as a couple. Because I can read a book and I can put into practice what I've learned in the book with you or with my wife, and it's going to feel very different. Because what we would want is very different than what our wife and I would want, or what you and your partner would want. So I think there's that whole thing about, yes, I can learn and see and all that, but then let's see how we, whatever the we is, feel in practice. I think that, So I like the notion of it's how it feels as a couple, what it means to us, and that sort of partnership piece. I really like that. So when you, and I don't know whether you do, but when you think about the future, so if you look back at your life, it's been very varied and multifaceted. And if somebody bumps into you on the street now that hasn't seen you for 20 years, they're going to be like, but when you were, but what? So do you have a vision for the next decade? What do the retreats look like? Are there more books in you, more teaching? Because I guess you can do a lot, one to but how do you get your message out in a broadest way possible? What does the future hold for you, basically?
I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I'm turning 66 in February. So hopefully like a good another 20 years. But I do have a new book that's coming out at the end of March called The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit, How to Enhance Communication and Create a Lifetime of Passionate Intimacy. And that book is specifically geared towards couples, and really codifies all of the work that I've, my whole model, I guess, if you will, of like how to help couples repair intimacy. So I'm hoping that will be read by thousands and thousands of people to be able to, you often think about like what's the legacy that you're going to leave behind. So I think 2 books are pretty good. I'm not kind of happy with that.
Just on that, how do you find the process of
Writing.
yeah, because you're obviously a very physical and emotional in best possible way, very connected. You're a very somatic person. So how do you right? I've got to sit down and type
Yeah,
away.
I'm also I also have a little bit of ADHD in me, so I can be very focused, right? It's like, I'm going to get this chapter done, and I'm going to sit down and write the damn chapter. So I, so I can be very, very focused that way. Writing it's not a very somatic experience for me. I'm way in my head. I'm almost like just in another world in my head, like in my characters, because in the second book, characters, but somebody was like, you should write a novel because I take people into coaching sessions, right? So I'm sort of in their head, like remembering what that experience was like, what our conversation was like. But yeah, but you know, I do run group retreats. I usually do one a year in Costa Rica, right? So that allows me to work with more people at a time, usually, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to 12 couples at a time. And then I am planning, and I put this in the capital P, planning on releasing or creating and releasing an online program that will have, it'll be a hybrid group coaching program and also online piece for couples. Particularly focused on empty nesters from a marketing perspective, because I feel like that is a group that really needs a lot of support. So I see that happening in the next 12 months, maybe sooner. And then in the next 10 years, I don't know. I mean, I try to be very present and live, you know, in the present. Sometimes I think about like what it'd be like to retire, but I don't know what I would do. And my partner's 10 years younger than me, so he's still working. But, you know, I'd like to spend more time with my kids and my grandchildren and travel more, and just be open to whatever opportunities, you know, show themselves, whatever that is. I love doing podcasts. I've been, I don't know, probably done 40, 50 podcasts in the last 6 months. I love getting the word out about this work because there's not that many people talking about it. And so I'm excited to be able to do that and meet great people. It's, you know, I'm kind of like a little bit of an introvert, but like one-on-one I'm great. So podcasts are perfect for me. As opposed to like speaking in a room of 100 people, which I've done, or 200 or 1,000, but it's not my favorite space to hang out in.
Well, I mean, what's obviously unique about you is your lived experience. And I guess everybody's lived experience is unique, but as somebody that's dedicated so much of their energy into this, but it's come from a place that's very, very different. And it's almost a, hey, look what was possible with me. So don't you be telling me that you've had, you know, 1 or 2 years with no sex in a marriage. Look at my marriage. So yeah, that's what makes it's so powerful, I think. I guess when you meet with couples or individuals, that then they're generally not coming to you to say how wonderful everything is. They're coming to you perhaps with some difficulties, maybe some trauma, maybe some past issues. How do you protect and nurture yourself so that you don't just end up carrying their angst and their anxiety? I always worry for people that do this type of thing that you do, that they have so much to, yeah. How do you nourish yourself basically?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, self-care is really important for me. Like we have a hot tub. I take a lot of hot tubs, which is very grounding and calming for me. But I also think like I'm a very empathetic person, and I know how not to let other people's stuff get inside of me. And I don't know that that's learned as much as it's just sort of inherent inside of me, right? I've seen therapists who just are torn apart. And I have been at times, right? But I think because I know how to compartmentalize, I think that's a big part. Like I'm a compartmentalizer, right? So I can compartmentalize my work with couples versus my personal relationship, you know, and I can move between that fairly easily. I have my own therapist. I have my, and sometimes we process, sometimes, if something goes awry or I've had a really hard session. I have a wonderful partner who, if I've had a really hard session, I can just like let him just talk about it, right? I have an energy medicine guru who helps me do a lot of clearing of other people's energies as well. I think that's maybe why I stepped back from doing so much trauma. I was doing a lot of trauma work. I'm also a trauma practitioner. And I think like at some level, maybe that's part of the reason I stepped back from it, because I was feeling like it was harder for me to remove myself from some of the, horrible traumas that people were experiencing, and I was helping them work through, even though I was super good at it. But I'm very self-protective.
Yeah, which I think is it's very selfless in a way, in that you're just ensuring you can show up as a genuine article of the people you work with.
Yeah.
Because they're obviously investing time and resources in spending time with you. And yeah, they want the genuine you. And if you're bringing something from previous sessions to that next session, it's not fair, really, is it? I guess you want to show up as you, and that's why people keep coming back to you. So my final question, and thank you so much for giving me so much time, you're very generous, is so if someone is listening and they perhaps recognise themselves in your story, so very successful in business, but perhaps feeling that they're not as emotionally or physically connected as they want to be, where should they start? What should be the first step that they should take to try and reclaim themselves?
Well, I would say reading that book would be very helpful, because I think it gives people a perspective on how couples get where they are. Like, actually, one chapter is like, how do we even get here, right? So I think having more information and knowledge so that you can start to have a conversation and begin to address it. I think the worst thing you can do, I'm just say this to everyone, is do nothing. Because everybody thinks it's going to get better if you do nothing, but it's not going to get better. It's just actually going to get progressively worse. So if you recognize yourself in my story, if you recognize yourself in the stories about, empty nesters, right, who are just looking at each other, you need to do something about it. You need to, address it, whether it's with your therapist, better if it's with your partner, if you can create, if you feel like that's a safe conversation to have. But you can't just do nothing, because you'll find yourself, on the other end, not in a happy place pretty quickly.
Yeah. He's almost acknowledging, taking the action, making the change while there's still time. Because, if you just ask yourself, well, so I've done nothing for the last 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, how's that worked out? It's not suddenly going to get better. There's very few things in life where things suddenly get better, are there? So just remind me of the title of the new book again.
So the new book is The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit.
I'm looking at that as March time.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon. Yeah, it's coming out now at the end of March.
Oh, fabulous. It's my birthday in March. That's a perfect gift.
You can pre-order it now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. You've been incredibly generous. And I didn't know what to expect, but you've really owned the space you're in. I think you're doing some really great stuff. So, just keep doing it.
Yeah, and I do want to tell your audience, if you want to get in contact with me to come to an international retreat, to come to a retreat in the U.S., you can go to my website, which is passionateintimacyretreats.com, passionateintimacyretreats.com, and that will be in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll put lots of things in the notes. Your website's fabulous, and your first book was amazing, so I know the next one will be as well. So thank you so much for your time, and it was great talking to you.
Thanks, Andrew. You have a great day.